Now, Gale's law would require insurance companies to cover additional cancer screenings for women with dense breast tissue. It had already passed in the Senate, and with the unanimous vote in the Assembly this week, now heads to the governor's desk.
Gale's law is a win for Wisconsin women and our families. It is the common ground that serves the common good.
Earlier in the floor session, the Assembly approved a bill that would legalize online sports betting in Wisconsin. The bipartisan bill would allow the practice to happen through the state's tribal casinos. This would not, however, give Wisconsinites access to popular online platforms like DraftKings and FanDuel. It comes after Wisconsin's tribal nations urged lawmakers to move the legislation forward. The Senate will now have to take up the bill before it could head to the governor's desk. And the Assembly is sending a constitutional amendment to your ballot this November. Thursday, the chamber passed an amendment that would bar governors from using their partial veto to create or increase any tax or fee. It's in response to Governor Evers' 2023 partial veto that allowed schools to raise the levy limit every year for 400 years. A constitutional amendment needs to pass both houses in 2 consecutive sessions to head to voters. But there is also legislation that could be dead in the water. This week, the Senate failed to vote on a bill to fund the state's nearly 40-year-old land conservation program, instead sending the legislation back to committee. The program will end in June if the Senate cannot come to an agreement. And Wisconsin Eye, our state's version of C-SPAN, faces an uncertain future. Republicans have not been able to agree on a proposal to keep the network up and running past the February short-term contract. And after months of speculation, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos announced he will not seek re-election in November this Thursday. Vos was first elected to the Assembly in 2004. He stepped into the role of Speaker in 2013 and has held that position longer than anyone else in Wisconsin history. Now, some of his most critical political moves include working with former Governor Scott Walker to pass Act 10. That's legislation that effectively ended collective bargaining for public employees. He was also criticized by President Trump for not immediately investigating the president's loss in the state following the 2020 election. The speaker got emotional on the Assembly floor Thursday as he made that announcement.
What made the biggest impact was regular people coming up to you in the coffee shop or wherever it was to tell you their opinion, even if you didn't want to hear it. There were moments of real pressure, moments when the institution itself was being tested. And I am so incredibly proud that all of us were able to stand together.
In response to the speaker's announcement, Governor Tony Evers said, quote, "Although we disagreed more often than we didn't, I respect his candor, his ability to navigate complex policies and conversations, and his unrivaled passion for politics." And during his final State of the State address, Governor Tony Evers declared this the year of the neighbor. However, that message of togetherness did not stop him from taking swings at Republican leadership in the legislature.
Thank you. Thank you.
After a brief introduction,
hello there, Wisconsin.
Governor Tony Evers quickly urging lawmakers to stay in Madison throughout the year.
Folks, I know many of you are up for the election, but here's the deal.
As the Assembly is set to adjourn by the end of the week.
Wisconsinites have high expectations for the work we can do together over the next 10 months, and they should.
Right now, the governor and top Republicans in the legislature are negotiating a property tax relief plan. The Assembly Speaker and Majority Leader sending a letter to the governor Monday with their terms, but leaving out the $450 million for general school aid Governor Evers asked for.
I'm hoping we can continue building on those efforts this session, including reaching bipartisan agreement on a plan to get meaningful resources to our K-12 schools and provide property tax relief at the same time. And it must balance these important obligations a heck of a lot better than the plan Republican leaders sent me this week.
Republicans have long blamed the governor's 2023 partial veto that allows school districts to raise the levy limit for 400 years for increasing property taxes.
I'll go 10 toes with any lawmaker about school funding. My 400-year veto isn't an automatic property tax increase, folks.
But Governor Evers also using the address to tout the work of his 2 terms in office, from housing to tourism and education funding to the Republican-introduced tax credits that he signed into law. The governor ending his speech with the message of the year.
We're all in this together, and we're going to get through this together, not by alienating our neighbors, but by getting to know them.
Immediately following the governor's critiques of the Republicans' proposal, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos told reporters Republicans tried to meet in the middle.
He wanted money for property tax relief. There's two ways to do it. The school levy credit, which we proposed, is actually bigger than his proposal. And then we also put other things in that he's wanted, which is funding for SNAP positions, making sure that we have funding for disaster relief, and an income tax rebate for every single person in the state who pays income taxes. So it seems to me we tried very hard to reach in the middle. Now it's the governor's job after a pretty partisan speech.
And next on For the Record, we're getting reaction to the state of the state, Vos's retirement, and Governor Evers' call to end gerrymandering. After the break, we're joined by both state parties to break it all down.
Welcome back to For the Record.
Thanks for staying with us. Well, it was a busy week in politics. Between the governor's final State of the State address to Assembly Speaker Robin Vos's announcement that he will not be seeking re-election in November, and for reaction to some of the biggest headlines, I sat down with both political parties in Wisconsin. Let's start with Wisconsin Democrats. So I want to get started and just kind of get your initial reactions to Governor Evers' State of the State address this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a testament to what the governor has been able to accomplish in the face of incredible opposition from the Republicans. I mean, for the last 8 years, most of the time they've seen more gung-ho on trying to prevent the governor's agenda than working with him.
But during that speech, we saw Republicans sarcastically stand up and clap, saying basically that Evers was taking credit for some of the bipartisan work, for example, those tax credits. Do you think the governor took credit for things that was done on a bipartisan basis?
I think Republicans like to criticize the governor when they find their opportunities and like to bash him when he has a couple of wins to rack up.
The subtext for the speech we heard this week, which is those property tax relief negotiations, we saw the governor publicly strike down the Republicans' proposal during his speech. What did you think of that?
I think it's the right move. I mean, we're looking at a situation that Republicans have put us in by defunding education year after year after year. And so when we look at what is happening at this local level with property taxes going up, it is because the Republicans will not come to the table and put the money in that is needed to prevent that from happening.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the future of the chamber here, because also, again, during the governor's speech, he mentioned he wants lawmakers to stay in Madison. He said there's more work to be done. Do lawmakers have more to do, or should they be hitting the campaign trail?
There's always more that we can do. I think the difference, though, that we're seeing is that Democrats have really been working at trying to get bills over the finish line, have been trying to deliver for their constituents. But let's just look at what happened 2 days ago with the postpartum negotiations. In the middle of it, Robin Vos, who I believe wants to hopefully be his successor, left to go do a fundraiser. I mean, this is something that has been on the table for years, that they have been roadblocking every chance they get. And so when we look at the seriousness of them coming at these issues, it's really hard to take it in good faith, because we look at 5 of the assembly seats. Almost all of them are in these incredibly tight, purplish areas where these are the sort of votes that are going to come back and haunt them. And so we look back at their history, they're trying to clean up their mess, but they've been stalling this for years, and I think that's what voters are going to hold on to.
So you're really giving that win to Democrats here, but this was done on a bipartisan basis. A lot of Republicans backing this too. We heard on the floor that Republicans criticized Democrats' move to add Gale's Law in the postpartum as an amendment to every bill the day before, saying that almost blew up negotiations. Was it really just Vos against this, or do you think the Republicans have some blame here for the holdup too?
I think it's the Republican Party as a whole. I mean, the fact that Robin Vos was able to stall this for years, he's not on an island. You know, he controls that caucus, but he also has to get buy-in from his members.
Let's talk a little bit about Robin Vos too. That big announcement this week that he will not be seeking re-election. He has really acted as kind of the counterbalance to Governor Tony Evers, kind of crippling his power before he even took office. What is the Democrats' reaction to that announcement?
There's no one been more damaging to the state of Wisconsin, other than Scott Walker, than Robin Vos. He has spent his entire legislative career essentially trying to knock Wisconsinites down instead of trying to find ways to lift them up and make their lives better. And so, good riddance to Robin Vos.
That's all we have time for this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to reaction from the GOP. Here's Chairman Brian Schimming on reaction to Governor Tony Evers' State of the State address.
The governor was very partisan and very petulant.
You're saying the message of the year of the neighbor wasn't conveyed in that speech?
Yeah, I didn't think so at all, really. Most of the legislators I talked to thought that it was kind of an affront to the legislature.
I want to talk a little bit about the subtext to this speech, which was that property tax relief debate that we're seeing kind of ongoing right now. The governor publicly struck down Republicans' proposal. What's your reaction to that?
A mistake for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is the first governor in my memory who used his veto power to create a whole new law to raise property taxes for the next 400 years. So the governor's got no room on property taxes, especially since now as people have gotten their property tax bills and seen how much they've gone up.
When these negotiations first started, we actually saw Republicans not on the same page. Was that a bad look for Republicans during this?
I didn't really think so. I think that was an insider's bad look.
I want to move now to something else the governor addressed in his speech, which was calling lawmakers to stay in Madison throughout the year instead of heading to the campaign trails. The assembly wrapping up its session this week. Do lawmakers have more work to be done in Madison?
I don't think really they have a lot of work to be done in Madison. And frankly, if the governor wanted the legislature to stay, he would have had a more cooperative attitude about trying to convince them to do that. But look, Republicans are ready to go to the campaign trail in the fall and say, look, the governor signed a 400-year tax increase. Every Democrat running for governor and being in the legislature supported that tax increase and that ability. That's the difference. They vote for tax increases. We vote to give people tax relief.
So you're saying lawmakers should break this early to go and hit the campaign trail?
Well, what I'm saying is I think they have some work to do and they want to get it done, especially on the tax and spending issue. So I hope that they're able to do that. But the governor's got to cooperate, too. He just can't point fingers.
I want to move now to a different call that he made, which was to end gerrymandering in the state. You know, as we mentioned, you chuckle a little bit there, but as we mentioned, the assembly breaking right now. So he said that they'll call a special session to take that up. Should gerrymandering end in Wisconsin?
The governor has been all over the place on this gerrymandering issue, and I wish he would get serious about it. Calling a special session is not serious. Being consistent is serious.
Should it end now, though?
It's not a matter of it starting or ending. The real question is, for people watching us right now, should they have their legislative or congressional districts changed yet again because of the governor's political motives and the Democrats' political motives? I don't think so.
So as we wrap up the session here and start to move more into the campaign mode, is there anything you're keeping your eye on?
Certainly, obviously, the Assembly seems to be in pretty good shape overall for the Republicans. Senate, probably where a lot of the action is. And really, the governor's race. I thought what the governor did in his speech the other night, again, unfortunate, was to take a hostile and kind of petulant attitude towards the Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate. I thought that was a mistake. It tells me that the governor is worried about the campaign.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Those are condensed versions of both interviews. To see the full conversations, you can head to channel3000.com. And next on For the Record, a Dane County Board supervisor wants to have less colleagues. Why he says the Dane County Board is too big and how the proposal would work when we come back. Welcome back to For the Record. Well, this past Tuesday, voters across Wisconsin went to the polls for the spring primary. Moving forward in the race to replace now Supreme Court Justice Susan Crawford's former position as Dane County Circuit Court Judge, immigration lawyer Huma Hassan and incumbent Ben Jones. They'll face off in the April primary. Ahead of the election, Madison City Clerk said the estimated turnout was about 8 to 10%. UW elections expert Michael Wagner says part of the reason turnout is so low isn't a lack of enthusiasm, but a lack of awareness.
Without races where we're learning about them through advertising or races that are going to be close, it's hard to get people motivated to show up in this particular kind of election.
The Medicine Clerk's office released some unofficial numbers about the election. As of Tuesday night, 14% of pre-registered voters voted. For Dane County overall, nearly 13% of people voted. Dane County Board Supervisor Jeff Wigand has proposed reducing the board size by 10 members. Currently, the Dane County Board has 37 members, the second largest in the state. For comparison, Dane County's board is larger than Milwaukee, Waukesha, La Crosse, and Brown counties. I sat down with him to talk about the likelihood of his proposal moving forward and what the board would do with the extra money. So I want to get started by talking about the first part of your proposal, and I want to ask why you think the county board should be smaller.
Yeah, Dane County's board is simply way too big. Sadly, there's a lot of supervisors that simply show up to meetings and they vote with the majority. They're not curious, they don't ask questions of staff, they don't author original ideas or proposals, they simply show up and collect a paycheck.
Why bringing the board down 10 members? Why that number?
You know, we'll spend money and no one will have any questions about how we're spending that money. Is that money being spent wisely, efficiently, effectively? And it just seems like there's a voting block that whatever the city of Madison wants, that's what ends up happening. So let's just have a more efficient board. Let's reduce it from 37 members to 27 members, and let's use those monies more efficiently and more effectively.
Whose seat should go?
So my proposal would give an independent commission up to 2 years to create the new maps. So my maps, reducing from 37 to 27, would go into effect for the next elections, which would be taking place in 2028. So it gives staff time to propose those districts in a fair, neutral, nonpartisan way. And then those would come to the county board and we would vote on them at some point in time during this upcoming term.
Would your position potentially be up to be cut?
That would be up to the commission. They would look at the populations, they would look at the criteria to create these districts, and we're simply talking about reducing them. So you're going to take a population right now, each supervisor represents roughly 15,000 people. With my proposal, those districts would be increased in size to about 19,000 people in each district, which is very doable. Like I said, a lot of other counties that are comparable to Dane County have done it, and I think that's in the best interest of our taxpayers.
Would decreasing the number of people on the board lead to less representation for folks?
Yeah, I think that's a common misnomer because right now they have a misrepresentation. There's a lot of supervisors that aren't representing their districts.
Now let's move to the second kind of talking point about this, which is that fund that some of these positions, eliminating them, the money would go towards. Why make it that fund? Can you kind of walk us through how that would work?
By going from 37 to 27 members, we'd be saving the county taxpayers about $130,000. And so half of my proposal would be to create a merit compensation fund within the Dane County Sheriff's Office. And that fund would be used to recognize the exemplary performance of our sheriff's office.
The sheriff's office has called multiple times for more deputies. During the last budget cycle, that was something they repeatedly asked for. Why put the money into a merit fund instead of towards funding new or increasing positions?
Well, I would be open to that idea as well, but I think $130,000 would maybe only fund one sheriff's deputy position. And I think the county board would probably shoot that down almost unanimously. But I think this is an idea that actually has some legs and can potentially pass.
The county is facing a multi-million-dollar deficit. Would you be open to some of this money going towards that or looking towards solutions? I know we saw things with budget cuts in different departments as well. Is that something that you would be open to discussions with?
You know, I think when it comes to our budget, we need to prioritize public safety. That always needs to be our main focus. I think there's a lot of other places that we could look to cut.
What have you heard from fellow supervisors so far? Are they in favor of this, cutting some positions?
So the idea is brand new, and I know this has been tried in years past. However, past efforts were really years ago, and most of the current board has really never considered this topic. And so I'm very curious to get their input and to hear what they have to say.
Now, you mentioned multiple times during this interview that you think that there's a little bit of a voting block. Are you worried that would be a barrier to getting this through?
Well, I think that by bringing this into the public light, I think just even by educating people that there are 37 members on the county board, I think it would be good. And I also think it might encourage people to just find out who their supervisor is. Most people, if you ask them on the street, hey, who is your Dane County Board supervisor? Most people have no clue. Again, because we have a lot of supervisors that don't take the job seriously.
We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
The proposal will have to go through the committee process before it could be voted on by the board. For the record, we'll be back right after this. Before you go, this week the country is remembering the Reverend Jesse Jackson. The civil rights leader died this week at the age of 84. Jackson met with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis shortly before he was killed. He went on to lead a lifetime of crusades in the U.S. and abroad, advocating for poor and underrepresented people on issues like voting rights, education, and health care. Jackson also ran 2 presidential campaigns, and you may recall he spent some time in Madison over the years.
All of you should come across that stage with the plume in one hand and the voter card in the other.
That's Jackson speaking to Madison East High School students in February of 2011. That does it for us this week, and a reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded interviews on our website at channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the record, I'm Ellie La Liberté.
This has been For the Record.